Oh, well, it looks like romance is officially dead. Well, at Sydney University, definitely. You see, if you are a Sydney uni student and you're ready to make a move on somebody, you're falling in love, you've waited for the perfect moment, you've been out for dinner, you're walking home under the stars, and then you think, okay, I'll lean in for a kiss. Well, no. You must ask permission first. So you're gazing into each other's eyes, centimetres or millimetres apart, and you've got to stop and ask permission before you try and kiss them. This online course at Sydney University says if you don't hear an enthusiastic yes, you don't have consent to lock lips. From this year on, every student has to take a course, get 100% on this quiz before they can complete their degree, and they even get shown stick figure images showing them what consent looks like. The university is trying to address consent issues in response to a report released last year, which found 6% of women at our nation's universities had been sexually assaulted. But does that mean that every time you want to kiss somebody, you've got to ask permission? I mean, have a look at some of the great romantic movies of all time. Do you reckon they passed the Sydney Uni test? When Jack and Rose are standing on the top deck of the Titanic and he says, close your eyes, and he gets her to stand on the railing, and then he leans in to kiss her. Shock horror, without asking permission. There was no enthusiastic yes from Rose. So Jack would get a big fail from Sydney Uni. Or what about The Notebook? When Noah and Ali reunite after 7 years apart, she's engaged to somebody else. Noah rushes up and grabs her and kisses her. Well, Noah would be punted from Sydney University too. This is political correctness of the highest order, and there's someone we've been speaking to about this who's been calling this stuff out for years and years and years, and she is Bettina Arndt, the author, journalist and sex therapist. Bettina Arndt, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ben.
Can you believe it?
Oh, yeah, I can believe it. In fact, Sydney Uni is leading the country in terms of this sort of social engineering, so I'm not surprised at all. And, you know, last year, Ben, remember we talked about the fake rape crisis on campus when the Human Rights Commission spent $1 million trying to prove how unsafe our girls were on campus. And they came up with nothing. I mean, they came up with 1.6% of women reported having had some sort of sexual assault using the broadest possible definition and including something that happens on the train or the transport in and out of uni. It wasn't just involving students. So they had this tiny percentage. Most of what they found were people objected to being stared at, harassment. And now they've cooked up, they didn't like those stats, so they've cooked up some new ones. So in this study of the colleges is now being used, pushing it up again to 6%. I'd love to see how that's, what that data really is all about.
I mean, the problem is here, it just doesn't even go close to passing the pub test. We know the way these things play out in real life. And yes, occasionally someone might say to someone, look, can I kiss you? But a lot of the time, it's just one of those things that evolves. And we all know whether it's a yes or the no. If someone says, okay, and they welcome the kiss and all of a sudden they're kissing you too, then it looks like that's a green light. If they say, whoa, that's a red light.
And how do you think the guys will do who constantly say, can I do this? Is it okay if? I mean, I don't think they're going to do very well with a lot of the girls in our society because it's sort of such nerdy behaviour to be constantly asking, can I, when women like men to show a bit of initiative in these matters and to be able to read their body language and to be able to, if you're running your hands down a man's neck and snuggling up to him, I mean, women assume that a sensible man will interpret that as being you're interested or
And what about the definition of an enthusiastic yes? So doesn't that add some confusion into the picture as well where you think, well, hang on a minute, that didn't sound too enthusiastic. She said yes, but maybe yes means no.
Oh, there was this crazy case you might have read about where a woman wrote an article about a comedian in America, and she went back to his apartment, and, he's a pretty famous guy, and they had all this sexual activity, including, she had oral sex with him twice, and then decided he should have realised she wasn't enthusiastic. I mean, it's all nutty stuff. I spent last year examining these sexual consent courses, which were being introduced across Australia, and Sydney seems to be the first one that's made it compulsory, and they are so crazy and really dangerous because they're all about putting the whole responsibility of with regard to sexual interaction on the shoulders of men. I mean, women are treated as totally inert. I described it as rather like a pot plant, on a gardening show where you're trying to work out whether the soil has dried out and, are the leaves wilting, are the flowers dropping off. You have to put your fingers in the soil to see if it's still damp. I mean, men are expected to do everything, to ask and to cajole and to find out what's going on in the woman's head. And the women are totally left out of this whole equation. It's all about don't rape. It's never about don't get raped.
Well, wouldn't we be better off speaking to the women and men and anyone who's in this environment and saying, look, what we need to do is we need to make sure that you guys have got all of the tools in your arsenal so that if you do find yourself in a situation where you're being abused or where someone's trying to do the wrong thing by you, trying to take advantage of you, you are absolutely and unequivocally assertive about, no, leave me alone, go away.
Absolutely, and that's what the research says. There's a woman in Canada called Charlene Sen who's looked at the sort of courses that are being introduced at Sydney and around Australia and said they don't work. These passive women courses don't work. What works is to teach women to be more resilient, to offer resistance, and to clearly express their, whether they want to go ahead or not. I mean, there's no point in having all of this if women are not capable of expressing a yes or a no. And so why would we leave women out of this? I mean, the fascinating thing is, of course, the feminists say that the minute we introduce anything about women's responsibility, that's victim blaming. There was this fascinating early last year on the University of Canberra website, they had messages about how to be sensible, during orientation week parties and so on. And they had a sentence about, don't use drugs or get drunk because you might do things you don't really want to do if you wouldn't do if you were sober. Other people may take advantage of you. Now, of course, the feminists objected to that, and the university took it off the website, because that's about don't get raped, and they see that as victim blaming.
Well, I see it as practical advice. We're speaking to Bettina Arndt, the author, journalist and sex therapist. I mentioned some of those classic love scenes, Bettina, The Notebook or Titanic, when Jack and Rose are on the top deck of the Titanic and he leans in and all of a sudden he gives her a kiss. He didn't ask permission. So should we go back through all of those great love stories and think, hang on a moment, is this kosher these days in 2018?
Yeah, I mean, and what's really weird is we live in a society where women are expected to be confident and able to express themselves, and this is all about some sort of wilting flower view of women who are incapable of making their own decisions and expressing them. I mean, I years and years ago was asked to do a program on Four Corners as a sort of guest producer, and it was on sexual consent. And I said no. The title was "No Doesn't Always Mean No," and I went out and talked to lots of women who said they deliberately get pissed because they don't want to make a clear decision about whether they want to go to bed with someone or not. So they'll just sort of wipe themselves out and let it all happen. So I talked about the shades of grey, and I talked about the fact that the part of this problem is women needing to know their own minds and make good decisions around consent, and that's what we should be teaching, as well as teaching men, obviously, to take no for an answer and not to coerce women into having sexual activity they don't want. There are two sides to this equation, and why are we only focusing on one?
Brilliant response. Always good to talk to you. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Bettina Arndt, the author, journalist and sex therapist.